On a cold February morning in 2009, in the quiet suburbs of New Jersey, a young woman left her apartment to start what should have been an ordinary day. Her name was Jennifer Ross, 23 years old, a graduate student at Rutgers University studying biochemistry, a daughter who called her mother every Sunday without fail, a friend who never missed coffee dates, a person whose life followed patterns as reliable as clockwork. She wore her favorite gray peacoat that morning, carried her leather messenger bag stuffed with textbooks and lab notes, and according to security footage from her apartment complex, she walked to her silver Honda Civic at exactly 7:42 in the morning. The car started, the headlights came on, and then Jennifer Ross disappeared. Her vehicle was found 3 days later in the parking lot of a rest stop along the Garden State Parkway, keys still in the ignition, her wallet and phone left on the passenger seat. But Jennifer herself had vanished as completely as smoke dissolving into winter air. For 16 years, her family waited for answers while investigators chased leads that went nowhere, while tips dried up and the case file gathered dust in a basement archive. And then, in the spring of 2025, a single phone call changed everything and revealed a truth so close to home that it had been hiding in plain sight all along. How does someone you see every day, someone you trust, someone you love, become the very thing you fear most in the dark? New Jersey in February holds a particular kind of cold that settles into bones and refuses to leave. The town of Millbrook sat 40 minutes outside Newark, a community of approximately 18,000 residents spread across tree-lined streets, where houses built in the 1950s stood shoulder to shoulder with newer developments from the 90s. Strip malls anchored each major intersection. A single high school served the entire district. Everyone knew the same pizza place, the same diner that stayed open all night, the same shortcuts through residential neighborhoods to avoid traffic on Route 27. It was the kind of place where people recognized each other at the grocery store, where teachers remembered students decades after graduation, where newcomers were still called newcomers even after living there for 10 years. Jennifer Ross had grown up in Millbrook, attended Millbrook High School, left for college at Rutgers in New Brunswick, and returned after completing her undergraduate degree to pursue graduate studies while living close to family. Her parents, Robert and Patricia Ross, lived in the same split-level house on Oakwood Drive where Jennifer had learned to ride a bicycle, where she had planted tomatoes in the backyard garden every summer as a child, where her bedroom on the second floor still contained posters from her teenage years. Robert worked as an accountant for a firm in Edison. Patricia taught third grade at Millbrook Elementary. They were, by all accounts, ordinary people living ordinary lives, the kind of family that appeared in no public records except tax returns and property deeds, the kind of people who became remarkable only in their absence. Jennifer's apartment was a modest one-bedroom unit in the Cedar Ridge complex, a cluster of three-story buildings arranged around a central parking lot with a small playground and a maintenance shed. She had moved there in August of 2008, 6 months before she disappeared. The rent was $850 a month. She kept the place neat, almost compulsively organized according to her roommate from undergraduate years. Books arranged alphabetically. Dishes washed immediately after use. A calendar on the refrigerator marked with color-coded commitments. The morning of February 9, 2009 began like countless mornings before it. Jennifer's alarm went off at 6:30. Her downstairs neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, heard the shower running at approximately 6:45, the same time it ran every weekday morning. Jennifer had an 8 o'clock chemistry lab at Rutgers. The drive typically took 35 to 40 minutes depending on traffic. She was never late. Her advisor would later tell investigators that in the 2 years he had known Jennifer Ross, she had never missed a lab session, never failed to submit work on time, never gave any indication that her carefully structured life was anything other than exactly what it appeared to be. Security footage from the apartment complex showed Jennifer emerging from her building at 7:41 and 23 seconds in the morning. She wore dark jeans, brown boots, the gray pea coat she had received as a Christmas gift from her parents, and a blue scarf wrapped twice around her neck. Her messenger bag hung from her left shoulder. She carried a travel mug in her right hand. Steam rose from the mug in the cold morning air. The footage, grainy and colorless, showed her walking with purpose across the parking lot, her breath visible in small clouds, her stride confident and unhurried. At 7:42 and 8 seconds, she reached her vehicle, a 2006 Honda Civic, silver, parked in space 114. The car's lights flashed once as she unlocked it with her key fob. She opened the driver's side door. She placed her bag on the passenger seat. She settled into the driver's seat and closed the door. At 7:42 and 41 seconds, the headlights came on. At 7:43 and 17 seconds, the car's reverse lights illuminated as she backed out of the parking space. The security camera's angle did not capture the exit of the parking lot. Jennifer's car disappeared from view at 7:43 and 34 seconds, heading toward the complex's main entrance, which led to Sunset Boulevard, which in turn connected to Route 27 and eventually to the Garden State Parkway. This was the last confirmed sighting of Jennifer Ross alive. She did not arrive at her chemistry lab. At 8:15, her lab partner sent a text message asking if she was running late. At 8:30, her advisor noted her absence in his records. At 9:05, Patricia Ross received a call from the university asking if Jennifer was ill. Patricia immediately tried calling her daughter's phone. The call went to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. By 9:30, Patricia was in her car driving to Jennifer's apartment. By 10:15, she was standing in the apartment complex parking lot staring at the empty space where her daughter's car should have been, a knot of fear tightening in her chest with each passing minute. Robert Ross called the Millbrook Police Department at 10:47 in the morning to report his daughter missing. The dispatcher, following standard protocol, explained that an adult who had been out of contact for only a few hours did not meet the criteria for a missing person report. Jennifer was 23 years old. She could have gone somewhere unexpected, could have changed her plans, could have had car trouble. The dispatcher suggested waiting 24 hours. Robert insisted something was wrong. His daughter never missed class, never failed to answer her phone. The dispatcher took down the information and said someone would call back if Jennifer did not turn up by evening. She did not turn up by evening. She did not turn up the next day. On February 10, 2009, exactly 24 hours after Jennifer's disappearance, the Millbrook Police Department officially opened a missing person investigation. Detective Michael Thornton, a 15-year veteran of the department, was assigned as lead investigator. He began by interviewing Jennifer's parents, her neighbors, her lab partner, her advisor, the security guard at Cedar Ridge Apartments. Everyone said the same thing. Jennifer was responsible, reliable, predictable. She kept to schedules. She communicated clearly. This was not like her. Something was very wrong. On February 11, 2009, at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, a state trooper conducting a routine patrol of the Garden State Parkway rest stops found Jennifer's silver Honda Civic in the parking lot of the Brookdale South service area, mile marker 116, approximately 38 miles from Jennifer's apartment. The car was unlocked. The keys were in the ignition, turned to the off position. Jennifer's wallet sat on the passenger seat containing her driver's license, 3 credit cards, $47 in cash. Her phone lay beside the wallet, battery dead. Her messenger bag was in the backseat, her textbooks and notebooks undisturbed. Her travel mug, still containing cold coffee, sat in the cup holder. There was no sign of Jennifer Ross. There was no sign of struggle. The car had not been damaged. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. The vehicle simply sat there in the parking lot as if Jennifer had parked it intentionally, walked away, and vanished. Detective Thornton arrived at the rest stop at 3:45 that afternoon. He walked the perimeter of the vehicle, noting the position of every object, photographing the interior from multiple angles. The odometer read 73,214 miles. He checked Jennifer's recent travel patterns. The distance from her apartment to the rest stop matched the expected mileage. She had driven directly there. No detours, no deviation from the route. But why would Jennifer Ross, who had a chemistry lab to attend, who never missed appointments, who kept color-coded calendars, drive in the opposite direction from the university to a rest stop on the Garden State Parkway and then disappear? The question hung in the air like the February cold, sharp and penetrating, offering no answers, only deeper mysteries. State police dogs were brought in to track any scent. They circled the vehicle, noses to the ground, and then sat down. The trail went nowhere. Jennifer had not walked away from this spot. She had not been here long enough to leave a scent trail. It was as if she had parked the car and been lifted straight up into the sky, leaving behind only the abandoned pieces of her ordinary life scattered across the front seat of a vehicle that should never have been there at all. Part 2. The investigation. The search for Jennifer Ross began in earnest on February 12, 2009, and it was massive. The New Jersey State Police coordinated with the Millbrook Police Department to organize search teams covering a 15-mile radius from the Brookdale South rest stop. Volunteers from the community showed up in waves. High school students Jennifer had graduated with, former teachers who remembered her from elementary school, neighbors who had seen her grow up on Oakwood Drive, people who had never met her but who had daughters of their own and could not bear the thought of a young woman simply disappearing. By noon, more than 300 people had gathered at the rest stop, organized into grid search teams equipped with maps and two-way radios and instructions to look for anything at all, that seemed out of place. They searched the wooded areas along the parkway. They searched drainage ditches and overpasses. They knocked on doors at nearby residential areas asking if anyone had seen a young woman matching Jennifer's description on the morning of February 9th. They distributed flyers with Jennifer's photograph, her height, her weight, her distinctive features. She had a small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall. She wore a silver bracelet that had belonged to her grandmother. She had brown eyes that her mother described as warm and kind. Local television stations ran segments about the missing graduate student. The story appeared in the Newark Star-Ledger, the Asbury Park Press, the Trenton Times. Jennifer's face looked out from newspaper pages and television screens, frozen in a photograph from the previous summer, smiling at a family barbecue, holding a glass of lemonade, looking like every daughter, every sister, every friend, looking utterly unremarkable and utterly precious at the same time. Detective Thornton established a timeline. Jennifer left her apartment at 7:43 in the morning. The drive from Cedar Ridge to the Brookdale South rest stop would take approximately 40 to 45 minutes in morning traffic. That placed her arrival at the rest stop somewhere between 8:25 and 8:30. The rest stop security cameras, however, had not been functioning properly for 3 weeks due to a maintenance issue, according to the manager. There was no footage of the parking lot from February 9th. There was no way to confirm when Jennifer's car had arrived or who had been driving it. Thornton interviewed the rest stop employees who had been working that morning, a cashier in the convenience store, 2 food service workers, a maintenance person cleaning restrooms. None of them remembered seeing Jennifer. None of them remembered seeing the silver Honda Civic. The morning had been busy with commuter traffic. Hundreds of vehicles had passed through. One young woman in a gray coat would not have stood out, unless she had made a scene, unless she had called for help, unless something dramatic had happened. But nothing dramatic had happened at the Brookdale South rest stop on the morning of February 9th. It had been an ordinary morning, ordinary traffic, ordinary transactions, ordinary routines playing out while a young woman disappeared without a trace. Clear's throat. Those who knew Jennifer found themselves grasping for explanations. Had she been depressed? No, her friends insisted she had been happy, excited about her research, planning a trip to visit her college roommate in Boston. Had she been in financial trouble? No, her bank records showed a modest but stable account balance. No unusual withdrawals, no signs of desperation. Had she been seeing anyone romantically? This was where the picture became less clear. Jennifer had dated casually during undergraduate years, but nothing serious. In recent months, according to her lab partner, she had mentioned someone new, but she had been private about the details, keeping the relationship to herself, perhaps waiting until it became more serious before introducing this person to her family and friends. Detective Thornton requested Jennifer's phone records. The dead phone found in her car had been examined by forensic technicians. The last call she had made was to her mother at 7:18 on the evening of February 8th, a routine conversation about nothing important. The last text message she had sent was to her lab partner at 10:32 the same evening, confirming their meeting time for the next day's session. Between 10:32 on the evening of February 8th and the moment her phone died sometime on February 9th, Jennifer Ross had not called anyone, had not texted anyone, had not used her phone at all according to the records. Or rather, she had not used her phone to communicate with anyone whose number appeared in her regular contacts. Thornton noticed something. In the 3 weeks prior to Jennifer's disappearance, a number appeared repeatedly in her call log. The number belonged to a prepaid phone, untraceable to any specific individual. Jennifer had called this number 17 times. She had received calls from this number 23 times. The calls typically occurred late in the evening. They lasted anywhere from 4 minutes to 47 minutes. The longest conversation had taken place on February 7th, just 2 days before Jennifer disappeared, and it had lasted 1 hour and 14 minutes. When Thornton attempted to call the number, it was no longer in service. The prepaid phone had been deactivated. Whoever Jennifer had been talking to had disappeared along with her, erasing the digital trail, leaving only the ghost of a connection that had once existed. The search continued through February and into March. Ground searches yielded nothing. Helicopter flyovers spotted nothing. State police divers checked bodies of water along the parkway. Nothing. The case began to consume the community. Candlelight vigils were held in Millbrook Park. Reward money was offered for information. Psychics contacted the police department claiming they had visions. None of the visions led anywhere. Tips came in through the hotline. Someone thought they saw Jennifer at a gas station in Pennsylvania. Someone else claimed to have seen her at a shopping mall in Maryland. Each tip was investigated. Each tip led nowhere. Patricia Ross stopped sleeping. She stopped eating regular meals. She sat in Jennifer's bedroom at the house on Oakwood Drive, surrounded by her daughter's childhood things, trying to understand what had happened. Robert Ross drove to the Brookdale South rest stop every weekend, walking the same paths the search teams had walked, looking for something everyone else had missed. The marriage strained under the weight of unanswered questions. How do you move forward when every moment is frozen in the last time you saw your child alive? How do you accept that you may never know? Detective Thornton kept working the case even as the weeks turned into months. He re-interviewed everyone connected to Jennifer. He examined her laptop, her email accounts, her social media profiles. He found a young woman who loved hiking, who posted pictures of mountain trails and sunset views, who quoted poetry and shared scientific articles, who seemed to engage with the world in thoughtful and measured ways. There were no alarming posts, no cries for help hidden in metaphor, no digital breadcrumbs leading toward an explanation. But there was one thing. In Jennifer's email, Thornton found a thread of messages with someone using the address Nighthawk77 at a popular email service. The messages had started in late December of 2008. They were brief, casual, making plans to meet for coffee, discussing books, sharing thoughts about music and movies. The tone was friendly but guarded. Jennifer never used a name. The other person never used a name. They referred to each other as Jay, and in the last email in the thread was sent by Jennifer on February 7th at 11:14 at night. It said simply, "Tomorrow night, same place. I need to talk." There was no response. The email address Nighthawk77 stopped being used after February 9th. Thornton traced the IP addresses associated with the email account. They bounced through proxy servers. Dead ends. Whoever N was, they knew how to hide their digital footprint. They knew how to communicate without leaving evidence. They knew what they were doing. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about theories. Maybe Jennifer had gotten involved with someone dangerous. Maybe she had stumbled onto something she should not have seen. Maybe she had tried to break off a relationship with someone who would not let her go. Maybe she had driven to that rest stop to meet someone and something had gone terribly wrong. But these were just theories, speculation built on the absence of facts, stories people told themselves to fill the void where answers should have been. By summer of 2009, the active search had wound down. The case remained open, but resources were redirected. Jennifer Ross became another name in the files. Another missing person poster aging on bulletin boards, another family living in limbo. The community slowly returned to its normal rhythms. Life continued because life always continues. But for those who loved Jennifer, time had stopped on February 9th at 7:43 in the morning, when a silver Honda Civic backed out of a parking space and drove toward a destination no one could explain. Part 3, The Silence. 16 years is a long time to wait for answers. 16 years is long enough for children to grow up, for careers to change, for entire lives to be lived in the shadow of an unresolved loss. For Robert and Patricia Ross, the years after Jennifer's disappearance were marked by a peculiar kind of suspended animation. They continued living in the house on Oakwood Drive because moving felt like abandoning the place where Jennifer might return. They kept her bedroom exactly as it had been. They paid the bill for her cell phone number for 3 years before finally accepting that she would never call. They attended support groups for families of missing persons. They marked every birthday, every anniversary of the disappearance, every holiday with a quiet acknowledgement of the empty chair at the table. Patricia Ross retired from teaching in 2012. She could not bear standing in front of third graders anymore, watching them grow and change while her own daughter remained frozen at 23 in photographs and memories. Robert continued working, but he became distant at the office, going through motions, his mind elsewhere. Colleagues learned not to ask how he was doing. There was no good answer to that question. The marriage deteriorated slowly, the way ice melts in spring, the damage invisible until suddenly the foundation can no longer hold weight. Robert wanted to accept that Jennifer was gone. He wanted to hold a funeral, to grieve properly, to find some way to move forward. Patricia could not accept it, would not accept it. She insisted Jennifer was alive somewhere, waiting, needing them. They fought about it in quiet voices late at night. They stopped fighting about it eventually. They simply stopped talking about it at all. The silence between them grew wider until they were two strangers sharing a house, sharing a loss, unable to bridge the distance that grief had carved between them. In 2015, they separated. Robert moved to an apartment in Edison. Patricia remained in the house. The separation was not acrimonious. It was simply necessary. They had been drowning together, and they needed to try drowning separately for a while to see if either of them could find a way to breathe again. Detective Thornton had retired in 2013. The Jennifer Ross case haunted him. He had worked hundreds of cases over his career, but this one stayed with him. The unanswered questions, the car at the rest stop, the prepaid phone, the mysterious emails. He had developed theories over the years. He believed Jennifer had met someone at that rest stop. He believed something had gone wrong during that meeting. He believed her body was somewhere within 50 miles of that location. But belief without evidence is just wishful thinking wearing the costume of deduction. Thornton kept the case file in his home office. Sometimes he would pull it out and read through the statements again, looking for something he had missed, something everyone had missed. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt that cold flutter of uncertainty when stories do not quite align, when timelines have gaps, when explanations feel rehearsed, you understand the particular torture of not knowing. Not knowing is worse than knowing the worst. Not knowing leaves every possibility open, every nightmare scenario alive and breathing in the dark corners of your mind. The Ross family lived in that not knowing for 16 years. And then, in March of 2025, something broke open. Not because of new evidence, not because of some forensic breakthrough, but because someone who had been carrying a terrible secret for 16 years finally could not carry it anymore. The someone was named David Morrison. He was 41 years old. He worked as an IT consultant for a firm in Parsippany. He had grown up in Millbrook, attended Millbrook High School, graduated 2 years before Jennifer Ross. He had never been a suspect in her disappearance. He had never been interviewed. His name appeared nowhere in the investigation files. He was, in every official sense, completely unconnected to the case, except that he was not unconnected at all. David Morrison had been the voice on the other end of the prepaid phone. David Morrison had been the person Jennifer was supposed to meet on the night of February 9th, 2009. And David Morrison knew exactly what had happened to Jennifer Ross because David Morrison had been there when she died. Clears throat. On March 14th, 2025, David Morrison walked into the Millbrook Police Department and asked to speak to someone about a case from 2009. He sat in an interview room with Detective Sarah Chen, who had joined the department years after Jennifer's disappearance, but who knew the case file well. Every officer in Millbrook knew the Jennifer Ross case. It was the department's most prominent unsolved mystery, a stain on their record that had never faded. Morrison sat with his hands folded on the table. He looked tired. He looked like he had not slept properly in a very long time. Detective Chen activated the recording equipment. Morrison took a breath, and then he started talking. Part 4, The Revelation. The words David Morrison spoke into that recording device on March 14, 2025, unraveled 16 years of silence. He said, "I need to tell you what happened to Jennifer Ross. I need to tell you what I did." According to Morrison's statement, he had met Jennifer through an online forum for hiking enthusiasts in late 2008. They had started chatting about trail recommendations. The conversations had moved to email, then to phone calls. They had met in person for the first time in early January of 2009 at a coffee shop in New Brunswick. Jennifer had not told her family or friends about Morrison because the relationship was new, and she was private about her personal life. Morrison had not told anyone either because he was married. He had a wife and 2 young children. Meeting Jennifer had been, in his words, a terrible mistake that I could not stop making. They had developed a routine. They would meet every Monday evening at a small restaurant in East Brunswick, far enough from Millbrook that they were unlikely to run into anyone they knew. They would talk for hours. Morrison claimed it was not physical, that they had never been intimate, that it was just talking. Just 2 people who connected intellectually and emotionally in ways their other relationships lacked. Whether this was true or whether Morrison was minimizing the nature of the relationship to reduce his culpability was unclear. What was clear was that on February 9th, 2009, the routine had changed. Morrison said Jennifer had contacted him on February 7th asking to meet earlier than usual. She had said she needed to talk. They had agreed to meet on Monday morning, February 9th, before her class. Morrison had told his wife he had an early client meeting. He had driven to the Brookdale South rest stop at 8 o'clock in the morning. Jennifer had arrived shortly after. They had sat in her car. And Jennifer had told Morrison that their relationship, whatever it was, needed to end. She had said it was wrong. She had said she could not continue seeing him knowing he had a family. She had said she felt guilty. She had said goodbye. Morrison's statement became less coherent at this point. He said he had gotten angry. He said he had not meant to get angry, but he had felt blindsided. He said he had grabbed her arm when she tried to turn away. He said she had pulled back. He said there had been a struggle. He said it had happened so fast. He said his hands had been around her neck. He said she had stopped moving. He said he had not meant to. He said he had panicked. Detective Chen sat across from Morrison and listened to this confession with a stone face that revealed nothing. She asked, "What did you do with her body?" Morrison said he had put Jennifer's body in the trunk of his own vehicle, a blue Toyota Camry. He said he had driven north on the Garden State Parkway to a construction site near the Interstate 87 interchange. The site had been abandoned for the weekend. He had buried her body in a shallow grave beneath piles of construction debris. He said he had returned to the rest stop, wiped down Jennifer's car, left her belongings inside to make it look like she had walked away. He said he had driven home. He said he had gone to his client meeting. He said he had lived with what he had done for 16 years. Detective Chen asked, "Why are you telling us this now?" Morrison's eyes filled with tears. He said, "Because I have a daughter. She turns 23 next month, same age Jennifer was. And I look at my daughter and I think about what I took from Patricia Ross. I think about what I took from the world, and I cannot carry it anymore. I cannot." The interview lasted 4 hours and 27 minutes. Morrison provided detailed directions to the burial site. He described the construction site as it had existed in 2009, layout details that could be verified against records. He described Jennifer's clothing, details that had not been released to the public. He described the interior of her apartment, which he had visited once. He provided the login information for the Nighthawk 77 email account, which he said still existed though he had not accessed it in years. Every detail checked out. Every piece of information aligned with what investigators knew. This was not a false confession. This was the truth emerging after 16 years of silence. David Morrison was arrested and charged with intentional ending of life, concealment of remains, and obstruction of justice. He was held without opportunity for release. The news broke on March 15, 2025. The community that had searched for Jennifer Ross 16 years earlier reacted with shock, anger, and a strange sense of relief. Finally, there were answers. Finally, there was someone to hold accountable. Finally, Patricia and Robert Ross could stop living in the terrible limbo of not knowing. On March 18, 2025, a team of forensic investigators and cadaver dogs descended on the construction site near the Interstate 87 interchange. The site had been developed in the intervening years. A shopping center now stood where empty lots had been in 2009. The investigators obtained permission to excavate a specific area based on Morrison's directions. They dug through layers of asphalt and concrete. They sifted through soil. And on March 20th, they found remains. Skeletal remains wrapped in deteriorated fabric that had once been a gray peacoat. A silver bracelet still encircling the bones of a wrist. Dental records confirmed the identity. Jennifer Ross had been found. The trial of David Morrison was scheduled for September of 2025. Morrison's defense attorney attempted to argue that the termination had not been intentional, that it had been a tragic accident during an argument, that Morrison had panicked and made terrible decisions but had not intended to take Jennifer's life. The prosecution presented the confession, the physical evidence, the 16 years of silence, the calculated disposal of the body, the wiping down of the vehicle, the abandonment of her belongings to create a false narrative. These were not the actions of someone who had accidentally caused harm in a moment of panic. These were the actions of someone who had made deliberate choices to cover up a terrible act and to avoid consequences. Those who had known Morrison, neighbors and colleagues, and even his own family, struggled to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the person who had sat across from Jennifer Ross in a parking lot and squeezed the life out of her. His wife filed for separation immediately after his arrest. His children, now teenagers, would have to live with the knowledge of what their father had done. The community grappled with the realization that evil does not announce itself. Evil sometimes looks like an ordinary person with an ordinary job living an ordinary life while carrying an extraordinary secret. Patricia Ross attended every day of the preliminary hearings. She sat in the courtroom and stared at David Morrison with eyes that held 16 years of grief and rage and loss. When asked by reporters how she felt, she said simply, "I have my daughter back. Not the way I wanted, but I know where she is now. I can bury her properly. I can say goodbye." Robert Ross, who had separated from Patricia a decade earlier, sat beside her in the courtroom. They held hands. The years of distance dissolved in the face of this final chapter. They had both been drowning, and now, finally, they had found solid ground beneath their feet. Not the ground they wanted, but ground nonetheless. David Morrison pleaded guilty on June 3, 2025, accepting a sentence of 30 years to life in prison. He stood before the court and read a statement. He said, "I took Jennifer Ross from this world. I took her from her family. I took her future. I took everything. And I lived my life while she lay in the ground. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I only hope that this admission, however late, gives her family some peace." Patricia Ross was given the opportunity to address the court. She stood, her voice steady despite the tears running down her face, and she said, "You took my daughter. You took 16 years we could have spent grieving properly, healing properly, remembering her properly. Instead, we spent 16 years in hell not knowing. You made that choice. Every single day for 16 years, you made the choice to stay silent. I hope you spend the rest of your life thinking about what that silence cost. I hope Jennifer's face is the last thing you see every night before you sleep, and the first thing you see every morning when you wake. I hope you never forget." Jennifer Ross was laid to rest on July 12, 2025, in Millbrook Cemetery, surrounded by family and friends and community members who had never stopped caring, who had never stopped hopping for answers. The ceremony was private, but hundreds of people lined the streets as the funeral procession passed. They held photographs of Jennifer. They held candles. They stood in silence as the young woman who had disappeared on an ordinary February morning, 16 years earlier, was finally brought home. Closing. The Jennifer Ross case closed on the official books with a conviction and a burial. But cases like this never truly close. They linger in the memories of communities, in the warning stories parents tell their children, in the way people look at their neighbors with a little more suspicion, wondering what secrets might be hidden behind ordinary facades. The case reminds us that justice delayed is justice denied, but also that justice, however late, still matters. It reminds us that the truth has weight, that silence has a cost, and that some people carry unbearable burdens until the burden breaks them open and the truth finally spills out. Jennifer Ross mattered. She mattered to her parents, to her friends, to her community, to the investigators who never stopped working her case, and to everyone who believes that every life has value and every disappearance deserves resolution. Her story ended in tragedy, but it also ended with accountability, with truth replacing mystery, with a family finally able to grieve and heal after 16 years of terrible uncertainty. That is not nothing. In a world where so many missing persons cases remain forever unsolved, where so many families wait in vain for answers, that is something worth acknowledging. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.